Do you hear me? Yes. Okay. I don't know whether we should say good morning yet. We are in Spain, so it's already still the morning. And if you have seen, my name is wrong there. And I want to correct it because it was a C after the S, because it's a German name. And although I'm from Belgian origin, I've been very much involved in public transport for the last 20 years and mobility, first by heading the Brussels mass transit system, and then later by being indeed Secretary General of UITP, which, as you know, is a worldwide organization gathering the industry, the operators, the authority, and trying to contribute to a better life in our cities. Now I'm retreated, and I'm only a consultant for an international firm by the name of Arthur D. Little. I've been asked to introduce this session, which from what I read in the paper was very much focused on technology. After having talked to all the future speakers of this today, I'm very glad to see that the problem of the future of mobility has not only been viewed from the perspective of technology, but also all the different trends that are characterizing our time today. And of course, you know, of course, the digitalization trend and connectivity issues, but also the urbanization, which is a growing phenomenon since, everybody forecasts that in 10 or 15 years from now, by 2050, will be 80% of the population of the world living in the cities. But also individualization. This is really the result of our consuming society, which was much more collective a few years ago, a few decades ago, and now, and you see it, for instance, in the emergence of what we call micro-mobility, like, pedestrian, biking, cycling. You have also the major trends of new energies, which is something which really taking a lot of energy. That's the way to say it. We were talking about individualization. I think by the same token, if we really want to make a good mobility system, we need to talk about integration and intermodality. And then, of course, all the usual trends that the change of lifestyle, the fact that the green world is more and more advocated by people. So all those trends, basic trends, we need to have them in the back of our mind if we want to go and design the future mobility. Because this world of mobility is pretty much uncertain today. As a consultant, that's part of our job, to try to list all the uncertainties and then to try to build scenarios which would, kind of raise the attention of the decision-making, how things should be developed. If you are looking at some of the cities today, the big cities, I kind of say that we are nearly close to a jungle. A lot of new players coming from everywhere with new initiatives. We know this free cycling system that were launched in certain countries and which has been creating a real jungle. The number of car sharing, the customer or the user, if we use this more neutral word, is a bit lost in front of that jungle and the numerous players. How do I organize myself to take advantage of all that offer? On the other end, the scenario, which would be the best scenario, in my mind, is a scenario where all those options would have, in the meantime, consolidate. So you might have more car sharing, you might have more carpooling, more air riding, but all this would be integrated together with public transport, mass transit public transport, in such a way as to be what we call, you all know this, mobility as a service, in favor of everybody. Because in the intermediate scenario between this chaos and the very well organized and regulated system of mass mobility as a service, you have different interim scenario where something is organized more by the private, or maybe Uber becomes, or Uber or equivalent becomes really the leader of the hail riding stuff, and where there is not really a good framework that allows the city to be pleasant to live and efficient, and also economically growing. So today, I know some scenarios, but I'm not going to reveal them today as a presentation. But we're going to try to tackle within the next 15 years. In the documents, it was 5 years. 5 years is a bit short, because 5 years, we don't know where the AV will be by that time. We don't really know whether it's not a longer time. We are very bullish today. If you look at the media, you know, the AVs are there tomorrow. And of course, it's a kind of an advertisement for the car manufacturing industry. The same with the train. Normally, they should be automated very soon, but it takes time to organize all this. Our time is long. And thereafter, I think that the right framework to see a difference between today and tomorrow is something like an horizon of 15 years. We're going to give now the word to many different people. There will be a dialogue. I'm very happy there's so many people around here. We will have a question and answer moment, so that you can raise your question. It's not that easy, because we need to go through a little technical exercise of uploading one of the application designed by the organization here. But it will start with try to get some presentation, some dialogue, some question and answers to make this as live as possible. And I will start with our first gentleman. It's a gentleman by the name of Norman Frisch. Actually, I don't know what he's going to talk about, but I'm confident that will be interesting. He works for Huawei Technologies, the Chinese telecom company. And if he's around, is he there? I give him the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alain. Same with Alain. Actually, it's also a German surname. Norman Frisch is my name. I'm working for Huawei, and I will go with you through a couple of slides on showing how we are approaching, as an ICT telecom supplier, the transport sector. Very quickly, we are talking about a company, 180,000 people. We have been in the railway business for quite some time. Since '96, we are delivering railway equipment into railways. Starting with GSMR in 2002, we have half of Germany is being rolled out with our GSMR equipment, which is a wireless communication solution for the German railways. You will see our solutions in many other railways. 36 innovation centers and 14 labs where we are actually doing, together with our customers, end-to-end solutions. So, moving quickly into the mobility. So, very important, we are talking about a smart network. What it actually means is the network, you can only be smart when you receive information. You have sensors, you receive that information, and we do actually replicate something like the human body. As more information we have, as more sensors we connect, as more intelligent we put into the network, we are able to have better connection, better operation. And this applies to all of the different technologies. You see them listed down there, if it is cloud, big data, IoT, artificial intelligence, or wireless 5G communication. When you look, and we're talking a lot about digital transformation, when you look, actually, in the railway and in the urban mobility sector, we are pretty much at the beginning. Other sectors are far further ahead of digital transformation. The banking sector, the ICT sector, they all already collect data and make sure that their operation runs as smooth as possible, as efficient as possible, and as quick as possible, with as least people working and doing mistakes in there. In the urban mobility part, you can see we're a bit further down on the line, and there's a lot of work ahead of us, and we can actually learn from the other sectors. And this is very important. So, And why do we talk that? Mobility as a service or transport as a service, we are talking about a seamless door-to-door operation. And honestly, in the mobility sector, we are very far away from that. This morning I moved here for the presentation, going taxi, flight, taxi. It wasn't a smooth door-to-door operation, and I think all of you would agree you did not have a smooth door-to-door operation, because what is missing? Actually, each and every of these operators are sitting on their data silos, and they're doing perfect operation within their network. The metro system does a perfect operation. The Uber I took this morning does a perfect operation, but they don't talk to each other because they sit on the data. And they don't do that because they want to not share the data. No, they don't have the ability to share. And this is exactly where ICT becomes so important. In the railway industry, we see a lot of already where we are moving towards a digitalization. We're moving up that curve you've seen before. Automatic train operation. Many of the, especially urban rail and aviation in the airports, you have these bubbles which move autonomously. Automatic train operation is there, but it works as a bubble. We have network operation control center based operation, meaning with the right equipment, and we're talking here about servers, virtual machines, we connect different control centers from a metropolitan city into one large control center, which controls the whole network of the city. This is very important. If you want to streamline the metro operation, you will actually have the different metro lines talking to each other. When you today go into control and command center, you will see many different types of technologies, technology islands for video surveillance, for public address, for passenger information systems. They don't talk to each other. And with the right equipment, IT, servers, virtual machines, this can actually create a network operation control and command center. Service innovations and intelligent operation, they're all moving toward big data, virtual machines, mass data, IoT narrowband. And this is not only happening in the mobility sector, in the urban mobility sector. No, it happens across all. You're talking about industry, you're talking about smart cities. All of these sectors actually move in the same direction into a digital transformation. And the key is, this is actually not only opening the door to share data between an Uber, a metro system, and the taxi system in another country. No, it also opens the options to allow service providers, which are strong in the finance sector, to do similar jobs for railways to maybe do predictive maintenance. So opening the system with a cloud-based solution, a cloud pipe and device solution, we allow a more smart solution and operation of your network. The next 4 slides are actually just roughly showing very quickly where these different solutions are. Cloud and network synergy. For the urban rail, we're talking about here a transmission network, wireless LTE solution, talking from the train to the ground, transmission up into the cloud, network computing storage, and from there further up you have different operating and control systems where you share the data between video, e-ticketing, or operation and security. Cloud pipe device, very similar. You have a transmission network, you do an end-to-end operation from the trains, from the maintenance yard, shifting out into day operation, stop and stop between the different platforms, and then ending up in the evening again in the maintenance yard, fully automated. How can you do that? With a device, you have the mobility, you see exactly what is happening in and outside of the train, you have train control and ELTE solutions for voice trunking and mission-critical data. Wireless networks, broadband networks, Wi-Fi, LTE networks, in order to support work mobility, meaning stuff which is maintaining your roadside equipment, maybe traffic light, maybe equipment along the tracks or platforms. These guys do have a mobile office, but can they use that mobile office? Only when their mobility are connected. They bring your own device. You have electronic work order flow. All of that needs to work together. When you do that, you reduce your maintenance costs and operational costs by 20%. We've seen this with some of our customers. Broadband and narrowband IoT going, and this is a huge area for especially railways and metro lines. They have a large infrastructure. Predictive maintenance help them to reduce the day-to-day costs they have to maintain and operate their equipment. Predictive maintenance, on the other side, requires a constant flow of data collected by sensors back into the big brain and predicting what is going to happen. Is this equipment going to fail or not? Should we send somebody down there to make sure the equipment maintains running? The last 4 slides were pretty much roughly 20 plus different technologies I was talking about. ELTE, GSMR, IP/MPLS, all of these different technologies. Where do they come from? We are very strongly involved in over 360 standardization, industry alliances, and organizations to ensure open network, open infrastructure, standardized telecommunication solutions. How can we do that? We pump every year 10% of our sales revenue into R&D. And this allows us as a company to actually have all of these different technologies, state of the art, in different sectors, in the mobility sector especially. How do we help here in Spain? IP/MPLS, transmission network, here in Spain for a large section of the Spanish high-speed line network. IP/MPLS is being used to run more than 30 different services in one infrastructure, in one network, meaning for RDIF staff, more simple to maintain and operate their transmission network, which is used by many different entities within the organization to deliver data from A to B. Another project we're doing here for Metro Madrid, it's a pilot, but it's a pilot for LTE. LTE, we brought the very first LTE network in the metro system in 2013. This was delivering video surveillance from inside the metro line into the control center, plus passenger information and public address. We're here doing something very similar together with the Metro Madrid in a European funded project and with a local partner. Another project where we see railways are moving up the curve is for Czech Republic. It's a data center. So the solution here is actually, we talked about the network operation control and command center, meaning we have many different computers in railways, and we actually create a data center, a large data center, storage, expandable storage, which allows the customer to reduce the operational cost and to be ready to expand data processing, to expand with their day-to-day rail operation. So cloud, how do I bring cloud in here? And this is a little bit getting abstract. Why do I need a cloud? What kind of cloud? Do I want, as a railway operator or metro line operator, give all of my data up to the public? No, and you don't need to. What the cloud actually means is, it's a function to allow you to share data which you believe are sensible to share. And you can have your own cloud at home in your own network operation center. You can have a cloud maybe in the alliance from Telefonica, Telecom, and Huawei Cloud. Or you can have a hybrid where some of the data is in your network operation and some data is being shared maybe to Uber or e-ticketing companies. The cloud allows you that. And the key item is, with the cloud, you suddenly have the ability to ask third parties to create very simple applications to come back to the multi-mode network operation. Meaning, I share some of my data with Uber. I can allow to share maybe passenger-oriented data. Meaning, a passenger like me, this morning, I had my flight ticket, I had to have an Uber, had to have another taxi here. Why can I not have that at once? This would give me so many different options as a passenger, but the operator also has a large benefit of it. Can you imagine if British Airways, sorry, I shouldn't maybe mention it, would have known this morning that I was late because Uber told them about that? They could have prepared for that. So the options allowing cloud solutions are actually massive. And when you talk about transport as a service or mobility as a service, the cloud is something where you, together with local partners, can very easily create such kind of solutions for your customers. So with this is the final slide, so we're almost through. The last point I want to mention is that today we are running more than 220,000 kilometers of road and track, which is somehow using Huawei equipment. For GSMR alone, it's 60,000 kilometers. We've got 50 airports where we provide solutions for IoT, cloud, passenger mobility, all of these kind of technologies. And with just on the other side, it's about 10 minutes walk through the hall, you will have the ability to actually see what we can be doing. And hopefully, I get some questions from you during the roundtable discussion later on. And with this, I want to close my presentation and give it back to Alain.
Thank you, Norman. I guess, as a former railman myself, I'm very happy that he has been able to show that the rail industry is step by step moving in the right direction for digitalization. There's lots of work to do because there is it's a very conservative industry which is always reluctant to change because we've always been doing this way, and why would we change? But there is room for change, and with some pusher and some leadership, you can have to go there. I will remind you that one of the purpose of all this is because we are suffering from the car. I'm afraid to be so abrupt, but what we're suffering of in our cities, and more in our cities, is because we have too many cars. And if tomorrow we want to organize an ecosystem which makes our city more livable, we have to offer to our customer, to the car driver of today, an easy solution to move without having to rely on car, except when it's really needed. And I think that is really the purpose that we need to find, is to make it as easy as possible, facilitating the life of our citizens, so as to make sure that one day, even just the air that we are breathing in our cities is acceptable and not polluted like it is today in cities like Beijing or even in Europe. The next step, I don't know really what they are going to talk about, but it's two distinguished ladies that will join the panel. One lady comes from a major company, Microsoft. As you know, we used to use the acronym GAFA, but you have to add GAFAM, because Microsoft is in it also. And of course, for many people, although it's a great company, for many people, we want to make sure that all those large companies are helping us and not dominating us. So we have Mrs. Trudy Norris-Grey from Microsoft, who is the CityNext leader worldwide, based in Seattle, far away from here. And we have another lady coming from closer, from Antwerp in Belgium. She works for the city of Antwerp. This is Mrs. Marijke De Roeck. And they're going to have a dialogue between each other because they know well each other, and they're going to make their own presentation that way. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Alain. It gives me great pleasure to interview you today, Marijke. The city of Antwerp. There are 3 points I want to make around the city of Antwerp. It's really important to you. It's really important to me. Do you know that the coffee that you drank this morning came through Antwerp? Do you know that many of the things that you wear or you carry actually transited through Antwerp? So it's really important that we keep Antwerp moving. The second thing, Marijke, is that this is a lady who has actually implemented door-to-door transit. Not just multimodal, but door-to-door transit. And I think we all want to hear about that. And lastly, why I think Antwerp is important, not least from what you've achieved, is that Antwerp represents 80% of the cities on the planet. It's not huge, it's not a Paris, it's not a London, it's not a New York, but it represents a city near you. Just in Europe alone, 30,000 cities like Antwerp. So my question to you is this something that you could implement in a city near you? So with that, Marijke, very important to us. You've done a lot of learning, but tell us the journey that you went on. What were the challenges? How long did it take?
Well, it actually all started somewhere around 2012. You have to know that the city of Antwerp, together with its port, is responsible for about a fifth of Belgium's GDP, which means that really Antwerp and its port are at the very economic heart of our country. Since we are a port city, of course, reachability and accessibility are really, really very important. But unfortunately, Antwerp is also one of the most congested cities in the world, which is a very big threat to the port as well as the city. So we knew we had to do something about this congestion, being at the very heart also of the European TEN-T network. So we have to deal with a lot of transport, trucks coming from Spain going to Denmark or to Norway. They all mostly come through Antwerp. So if we want all the economy in Europe going, we had to do something about this. So the first idea was, okay, let's start improving the infrastructure. Okay, so far so good. The funds were there, the plans were there, and the roadworks were being planned in 2012, 2013. And the implementation date came nearer and nearer, so we thought that most of these major roadworks would start in 2014. But if you are already a very congested city and you add roadworks throughout your city and your port, what will happen? More congestion. So we knew that we had to come up with a kind of mitigating plan just to really ensure that the congestion wouldn't really soar to the sky. We came up with a plan to make the most of the people working in Antwerp, commuting to Antwerp on a day-to-day basis. We wanted to make them shift their behavior. So we really wanted to invest in a modal shift from car trips to more sustainable trips. So this was the idea. This would not only improve the accessibility of the city and of the port, at the same time, we're also hoping to see a major increase in air quality and a reduction of noise pollution, because these two are really big issues that the city is facing right now. And we also want to be an attractive city for investors, for residents, for students, because although you're not aware of this when you visit Antwerp, but we are also a student city. So, but this as a city, you want to be an attractive living place as well.
So tell me, what kind of modes of transport were you covering when you looked after this program?
Well, since the car is no option, you get stuck in a traffic jam, we were looking at public transport as a first partner, the most logical partner. But when we started to kind of calculate our KPIs, we knew that by 2016, we had to be able to convince more than 10,000 car users per day to change their behavior. So when we started looking at public transport, we knew that they were not covering the need that we were facing. So we knew that when our Flemish transport company, they had still room for, let's say, to cover 3,000 car drivers. That doesn't suffice. So we knew that we had to broaden our mobility system. So we were really trying to expand, especially the offer that we are making in shared mobility. As a city, we employ our own shared bike system, Velo, which was at first only at the inner part of the city. We expanded that throughout 2016. But we also invited private companies to come to Antwerp with their own shared mobility offer. So right now, today, we have about 10 different private companies offering shared cars, and we have more than 3 free-floating shared bike systems, all operating in our city.
But tell me also, and tell the ladies and gentlemen here, what happens if I've already got my own bike?
Well, if you've got your own bike, you're okay, especially when you use it to come to your office or to go to work. If you have your own bike and it was still sitting there somewhere in the hallway or in your garage, we offered you an incentive. So we have an entire scheme of subsidies just to get people out of their cars and onto their bikes. But then again, the complaint can be made, yes, but I don't really know a safe route to get there. And so the city was also thinking of how can we help people get out of their car and use another means of transport, be it a bike, be it public transport, or be it a kind of shared mobility. So the idea rose somewhere in 2014. We went to the Netherlands. Of course, when you're a Belgian city, you go to the Netherlands and you have a look at what they're doing there. And in the city of Maastricht, we saw that they were kind of dealing with the same kind of problems as we were. And Maastricht had come up with a kind of travel planner. And this travel planner was supported by B-Mobile. And yeah, we started thinking like, it's really nice to have a travel planner that does what you really want to offer as an advice. Because when you look at all the classical travel planners, and I apologize because I'm going to insult Google and I'm going to insult Waze, they offer you simply unimodal advice. So they give you an advice to get into your car, or you can get on your bike, or you can start walking even though it's unfeasible, or you get an advice for public transport. But they never combine all these things. And when you're a car user, you can use Waze, and they'll tell you also how to avoid all the road blockages or all the congestion on the road. But this was not what we wanted. We especially wanted a type of advice that would get people out of their cars, or at least out of their cars before they reached the congestion in the city. So we were very ambitious there, and we wrote up a tender, we put it out in the market, and the ambition was build us a truly multimodal travel planner, one that combines car trips with public transport and with bike trips. And not only with bike trips of your own bike, but also with shared bikes. So we wanted to add the shared offer there as well. So this was a challenge we put in the market at the end of 2014. It took us quite some time. By the end of 2015, we had a company, B-Mobile, who offered us a solution. And we already knew B-Mobile because they were working with us on our parking system. So they were already giving advice to car users. But now the challenge for them was integrate a good advice for bike users and for public transport users, and most importantly, for users who need to combine all these modes on their trips.
So one of the things that I'm always asked about is, I want frictionless travel. So you've done that, but what about the payment?
Yeah, this is still something where this is still a challenge for the city. I've already told you that we also looked at the private market of mobility companies because we knew that the public transport sector wouldn't suffice. So thanks to that, we were able to gather kind of a marketplace in Antwerp. Today, we have more than 80, not 18, 80 different players that have a mobility offer in Antwerp. And now we know, okay, when you've got this many, and it's all siloed, as Norman just indicated, then it's not going to work. So as of 2016, we were also thinking about introducing mobility as a service in our city, so as to be able to combine all these different offers in indeed a seamless way, because pricing is a kind of a barrier, but not only pricing, also the fact that people don't know how all these different offers operate. People don't know how they can buy a ticket for the lane or for our railroad company, or how even our shared bike system operates when you're on the go and on the fly. So this is why we introduced this. We're not there yet, but we have been able to operate as a kind of a living lab in our city. Today we have 4 different MaaS providers working in Antwerp. One of them has got a B2B offer, and we've got 3 of them working on a B2C offer. But it's still all very confined and in a really, in a kind of a pilot way. And what we see there is that interoperability, or really the sharing of data and the sharing of services, is crucial, is key. But also key is the availability of an intermodal travel planner. Because if you don't get intermodal advice, people won't use all the services that you've got there. So it starts with a good intermodal advice. So we knew that the foundations are there, and so the building is being is under construction. Let's say that we've started to put out a number of seedlings to build a kind of a mobility ecosystem. Yeah. The soil is there, it's a very fertile soil, and as a city, we're hoping to speed up the growth of all the seedlings that we've put out there by issuing several calls. And one of the next calls we're going to issue is how can mass providers and mobility providers or mobility service providers come and work together on an IT platform, because we know that it's very difficult to open up your processes, your digital processes to others, to make the right kind of services and APIs, just to be able to share stuff. We believe that there's a huge market out there. There are a number of frustrated car drivers waiting for solutions. So just a big invitation to the market, and just join hands together and start collaborating and help us build this system.
This is really impressive. Door to door, you're doing it now. But tell me, what does the citizen or the visitor think? What's the KPIs? How are they doing?
The KPIs, fortunately for me, they're very good. We knew that in 2017, we had to convince about 10,000 car users per day to leave their cars at the border or the skirts of the city, because if they would have entered the inner city, all the computer models told us that we would get a gridlock. That was the prediction. So we knew that this was a challenge. So we set up a monitoring system as of 2016. So we were monitoring how many cars were entering the city every day or leaving the city every day. And so we had this zero research, and then we had the testing afterwards. Yes, we did manage to get more than 10,000 cars out of the inner city as of the big roadworks that started in the half of 2017. We did it. We're not there yet, because the real big roadworks are still lying ahead of us, and our KPIs will rise. I can't say what the number will be, but it's quite impressive. But we still got a lot of work to do there. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think you'll agree with me that this is really impressive. A real avant-garde in terms of addressing the door-to-door and using mass transit to address mobility as a service. So we've run out of time now, but I would urge you to come to the East Agora, 4 p.m, if you'd like to discuss more about intelligent cities, including urban mobility. And please come to the Microsoft booth if you want to find out more about this application, about Be Mobile, or any other of the Microsoft offers. I think you'll be impressed. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Marijke.
Yeah, thank you.
You're going to stay. You should stay, because we're going to have a... Where is it? Okay, thank you very much. Being a Belgian citizen, I can tell you that Antwerp is the worst place to go with a car. The ring around Antwerp is really dreadful. When it's raining, like it's usually raining in Belgium, and when it's in the dark, it's one of the places you don't want to go. So it looks so dangerous. Anyway, what I'm happy to see is that things are moving, and in fact, the real issue is maybe the governance issue. Because today the market is very bullish, and everybody is coming up with an initiative. You heard that by Marijke, that AT supplier of mobility in Antwerp, and you can duplicate that everywhere in Europe. The problem is to organize that ecosystem, and I do believe that's where it is difficult. Antwerp actually, however she thinks, is not pioneering. I tell you, knowing from my experience, there are other cities where things are much more advanced. And I would refer you to two cities. Helsinki, which is a private sector organized mass, and Vienna, which is an even better system in my opinion, but I can explain, which is about having a coalition of all the mobility players of Vienna under the guidance of the Stadtwerke of Vienna, who has been taking that leadership, and they already have a system that works, and that is being made in such a way that it's very inclusive. I think something we need, and I already discussed that with my partner of that future panel to come, is one of the major issues between the chaos that I described and the ultimate goal of having things regulate for peaceful mobility and well organized. You may have different scenarios where you are not inclusive for everybody. So, private partners are normally trying to make money, which is fair, and that's what is driving their innovation. But at some point in time, they don't care for part of our city, because some part of our city is not very profitable. And in cities we have, especially in Europe, we have many, say, poor people, low middle class, and those guys would not be able to move if you don't give some sort of guidance and governance and do something which is already working very well, because, it seems to discover the moon here. But in fact, if you look at rate cards, so tariff, price for transport, there is in Germany integrated rate cards for years. There is the same here in Barcelona here. And it means that when you buy, you use different player of the supply chain, one public transport, then another public transport, another a car, it's on the same smart card, and you have a price for the whole system. So this is something that can happen if you have a good public governance that push for this. And that will be my intermediate conclusion. There are many examples. Everybody's trying. But what we should do is to try to consolidate, get some public governance without killing the private initiative. Let's be clear on this. It has to be balanced, but which finally, who is in the most legitimate to take care of our city, if not our politician, our decision maker? They have been elected. They are the one who needs to tackle this issue, using all the strengths and initiatives of the private world, and so as to make sure. And I'm afraid when I was mentioning Microsoft, what we really want, and that was the mantra of the UITP, was yes, we want to collaborate with the industry. The industry is a very important player, but it has to be left, the decision has to be left in the end of the elected people, and the one who are elected to run our cities, and that is there where we have to go. Now, we have a second panel, very interesting, I think. And there a smart gentleman from Amsterdam. He will join us very, very soon. But after the break, it's now, I think, a bit earlier than projected. It's the break now. We will resume in 15 minutes at 2 o'clock with our friend Baron. I don't know where he is. He must be somewhere, leading the show for the second part of this session. Thank you very much for your patience. Yeah, my role this time will be much shorter. It's more of a technical role. I have to explain you that at the latest stage, we will have a question and answer session for the panelists that you will see in a minute. And to make it easier, at least that's the purpose of all this, we're going to have to use an application which has been developed by this organization, which is called Ask and Vote. And it allows you to raise questions that will appear on my tablet here, and we will use those questions as the beginning of the discussion. So what we want you to do is to be your smartphone or tablets to be connected to Wi-Fi. I guess that you know that it is called Cisco 18. Then you have to open the Smart City EWC app and click on the Ask and Vote option. If you don't have the app, you should open your web browser and go to www.smartcityexpo.com/ask-and-vote. And thereby you will be in a position to type your question, and this question will come here. But this is for a later stage. I hope, I've never been doing that in my life, I hope it's understandable. And in the meantime, we'll start with our moderator, a friend from Amsterdam City, Mr. Baron, a very well-known person. You have the floor, my dear.
Thank you. And thanks for the opportunity. I think Cisco 18 sounds a bit like a website for adults, isn't it? Meaning you need to be 18 and everything. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to this session, on this panel on urban mobility and the ecosystems that are needed around it, basically. I mean, we're swapping away from an era where you just had roads and cars or tracks and a train, etc., to something that's a mix of mobility, basically. And this panel is about, hey, what can we learn from our guests? But also, hey, what can we learn and what do we still need to learn so we can get away from this room with a bit of homework of stuff to think about and work on the coming days, weeks, and years. But get a bit of a feeling in the room who we have in the room, basically. I mean, who owns a car and uses it? Raise your hands, please. Who doesn't own a car then and uses it? So a lot of people that have a half a car, a semi-car, or who travels on a weekly basis with public transport? Who has a bike? That's pretty good. Who uses his bike on a weekly basis? And for commuting? Oh, okay, less. Okay. So not that bad, actually. I mean, I think we have a pretty multi-modal mix in the room. We have a few people who don't travel at all, 5 or 6. But for the rest, I think car use, ownership, public transport, bikes. So I think we have a good mix of people in the room. So what we're going to do is we have 4 speakers who give a brief 5-6 minute introduction on their views on, well, where will we be in 5 years on our urban mobility and what's the ecosystem around it. And then we try to have a bit of discussion amongst the members of the panel, but also with you in the audience. So please start thinking about for questions during the presentations and the introductions already. So we start with Mark Saunders, who's the director at Ferrovia, based in Edinburgh. Well, take us with your thoughts, how you look into the ecosystems that are needed. Big hand, please.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, so what I'd like to talk about is avoiding the paralysis of choice. Again, we have a full room here, so obviously you guys are interested in future mobility, smart mobility, new mobility. So let's go. Okay, so the first session really sort of set the frame around 5 years, which I think probably in this room we all agree, Alan especially, is quite short. What sort of change are we going to see in 5 years? Well, it's not going to be no change, or at least I hope it's going to be no change. Look at those images. But it's equally unlikely to be big change. So probably somewhere in the middle. So what is it that's really affecting that sort of change, the pace of change, and what kind of change it is? So here we have, you know, and you will know that your own context. You could be from cities, from local government. You could be third sector. You could be businesses. So from your own perspective, you would have this view. Where do I start? From a business, where do I invest? From a third sector, where do I support? So these choices, some of these are technologies, some of these are business models, but they're all choices. And my argument here is that if we're not careful, we have a paralysis of choice, which means that we're not able to make a logical step forward. In the top right, you have the Ferrovial Services car share operation in Madrid, for example. Does car share take away from public transport? Well, it can do. You know, if it's not designed well, it can do. If it's designed well, then it can enhance public transport. Uber versus taxi. It's not Uber and taxi. Is scooter share Is that against bike share? Maybe it's the new bike share. No, it's just it's a different demographics, it's a different user base, it's a different mode of transport. We have these challenges, these questions around docked bikes, dockless bikes, as Ferrovial Services will be operating the docked bike service in Barcelona next year. Is this about public? Is it about public control, or is it about letting it open for the open market? Unless we have a platform and a foundation for these questions, we're going to struggle to move forward. So I'd like to use this presentation to really set some of the foundations and set some of the corners of the framework which will help us move forward. I'd like to commend this report to you. This report, you can see that we were a participant and a sponsor of this report. This is being launched this week. And really what you can see is there is a business and financing plan for smart cities. And part of that, a key part of that, albeit not only the only part, is mobility. And what that really says is that mobility is a good bet. It's a good bet for businesses, and it's a good bet for cities. That means it has a good return on investment. And the advantage of this report is that it's actually quantified. And we don't see many numbers associated with mobility and other smart city focuses. We see lots of technology. We see IT, but we don't really see, well, why should you be doing it, and which is the correct order to be able to do these things. We can see that mobility benefits people at an individual level. So that could be in terms of time, could be in terms of fuel, real cashable benefits. But it also benefits at the city level. If you reduce congestion, for example, then you improve the quality of the air, you allow businesses to flourish, and you support the local economy. Who'd have thought that something on mobility affects and promotes local economy? We can see also through the report that ride sharing is significantly up. Different time frames, there's a 3-year time frame here. Car sharing, these are things which are going to happen in the next well, they're happening now, of course, but they're going to continue to happen in the next 3 years. So in our 5-year or in our longer term time horizon, these are the things that are going to happen now. Connected autonomous vehicles, they might have a slightly longer term horizon, but still we can sow the seeds for that development now. You can also see some of the benefits of car share at the bottom, that more people that use car share start to reduce or even select their private vehicles as a choice. Another interesting part coming from the report is how different cities allocate their budgets to mobility. This is a relative term, but poorer cities, for example, Lagos, sorry, I should say that a benefit of this report is that it spoke to government people, it spoke to businesses, and it also spoke to local citizens within over 130 cities. So now we have this benchmarked data, and we can see that generally people in poorer cities, this was a trend that came out overall, are not happy with their local government because they feel that they're not investing enough in mobility. Other developed cities, richer cities relatively, so for example Chicago and Copenhagen, the citizens are happy with the way that their cities have performed and invested into this. An example we have on the right is a project, a computer vision project that we did in the UK, and this demonstrated benefits both to the citizen in terms of facilitating their passage through the city centre, but it also speeded things up for the vehicles too, and improved air quality. You can do all of those things at the same time. So in terms of just sort of wrapping up, I have two slides left. What about key considerations in this new mobility? Is it public, private, or voluntary? Is it public versus private versus voluntary? I would hazard that it's a little bit of all of them. Certainly there is no one size that fits all. Every city, every place will have a different mobility solution from the next one. It's not possible to copy and paste in every scenario. Certainly there is no single organization that can deliver this. The people speaking on this panel are all large organizations, but none of us can do all of this. Therefore, it takes us to a point of collaboration. We heard it earlier. Data must be accessible, not hoarded and protected by people. It doesn't mean it's free, and it doesn't mean that it's not belonged, but it needs to be accessible. And this pace of change, I'll give an example of the you know, the worst case of the pace of change. This was maybe when there was an oversupply of new vehicles, but also in terms of reduced demand. So the supply and demand wasn't in this balance. So the pace of change was wrong. We need to decide the pace of change to move forward. The picture bottom right would probably explain where the pace of change is not quick enough. And that reflects voters and so on. Okay, so in summary, I'd like to leave you with this. We're all interested in intelligent mobility, new mobility. We all want to move it forward. But how? How do we avoid this paralysis of choice? And I would just suggest some of these things, which are short-term activities, probably in the next 12 to 24 months. These are real things that we can do, together. Understand what you're trying to achieve. Paint a picture, paint a vision, and then it's helpful to have people comment on it. What is going to work in your city? That not everything will work everywhere. So have a sensible thought and a discussion about really what's going to work here. Will the dockless bike scheme with 5,000, 10,000 bikes landing next week on Monday, will that work? Maybe it will, but maybe it won't. Be clear on the role of the council especially. This is a multi-stakeholder collaborative approach, but be clear specifically on the role of the council. Do you want to lead? Do you want to facilitate? Or do you want to step back and let it happen? This is a role you could choose. The point about understanding what people want and expect, really engaging your wider stakeholder, but especially the citizen. Ultimately, there's no point in having a technology or a service if people aren't going to use it. So really ask them, really listen. We're talking a lot about moving people around, but also moving goods is an important consideration here. What does that look like in your city? How would that be improved? And I suppose the final point, having identified and collaborated, co-created on a vision that people can buy into, what is the roadmap? I think having a vision is good, but you need to have that roadmap that helps people understand what is step one, what is step two, and when they come in. That way we'll avoid this big rush to do everything at the same time. And if possible, you can make that apolitical, maybe not so easy from a city point of view, but if you can, and if you can make it longer term, then I think we have a chance of success. Thank you.
Great stuff, big hand. Thank you, Mark. I'll take 5 seconds of rest and think of one question you want to ask to Mark. So we do questions later on. Take 5 seconds. Everybody has a question? Yes. Then we go to the next speaker and keep the speed up a bit. Sylvain Chef is the International Director of Bouygues Energy, Bouygues Construction. And he's the, well, I would say the driving force behind your international innovation at Bouygues. Here you go.
Okay. So, good morning, everybody. I'm very happy to be here with you in order to share some ideas and to share the approach of our group, Bouygues, regarding mobility and smart mobility. Let me start with a short presentation of our group. Bouygues Group has been supporting the development of cities of territories for decades in France, but also on the 5 continents. Our group specializes in design, construction, but also operation and maintenance of major infrastructure, in particular, the mobility of goods and people, roads, motorways, high-speed railways, but also city centers, hospitals, buildings, and so on. Group Bouygues is a major player as well in the energy and the digital transformation, like photovoltaic farms or data centers. While continuing these activities, our approach has expanded for more than 20 years now to support cities and territories in their vision and the programming of their projects by providing a prospective approach based on the needs of users. We can exchange our points of view about the smart, connected, and desirable city during these 3 coming days, so I can tell you how we deliver as a technical and financial aspects. Today, I'm not going to advocate technical solutions, but I'll share with you the future of mobility from the user's point of view and more accurately from the citizen point of view. Why? Because the solution for the same problem will not be the same depending on socio-economical and the environmental aspects. For example, technically, I do not solve the congestion problem in Moscow as in Cairo, nor the air pollution in Copenhagen as in Paris. Everybody agrees that mobility is one of the major challenges of the sustainable and desirable cities. But demographic and mobility growth, alongside rampant urbanization led by function, have all caused homes and jobs to be dispersed and town to be spread out. We can distinguish two types of mobilities. The chosen one, to travel for leisure, and the constrained one, to go to job every morning, to shop. And these two types of mobilities can be improved by providing technical solutions, more train lines, wider roads, etc. What we can do. But this improvement cannot only solve the problem on the long time, because more infrastructure leads to more mobility. So it was therefore time to rethink the organization of the city in terms of proximity. It was also time to think service and accessibility rather than transportation. Mobility is evolving, and it's no more just about transportation. It's in this framework that we have conducted from December 2017 to June 2018 an open and collaborative sociological approach with 100 people from different backgrounds, sociologists, engineers, architects, as well as urban planners, to better understand what will be the urban mobility of tomorrow. We have co-produced together a desirable vision of mobility through the prism of uses. We relied for this on the Observatory of Emerging Uses of the City, a survey of 7,000 Europeans conducted by our partners, Kronos and Obstacle. A very nice and effective book has been produced on this subject. I invite you to take a copy on our stand. So, what's the result? 4 proposals.
2 minutes.
Okay? The first one is to address the user ecosystem, meaning it's necessary to take into account the diversity of profiles and needs of individuals in the design and of the proximity and mobility in the city. The second proposal is to satisfy the demand for local services. Make it possible to have the city within arm's reach, meaning to access resources, opportunities, and social options in close proximity to where users live. The third proposal is to support sustainable mobility practices. And the final one is to design the infrastructure with a long-term approach, meaning a flexible use. So I will stop my presentation just now, and I invite you warmly to come and to see some of presentation of our oncoming projects following this approach on the Bouygues and Colas stand. Thank you.
Big hand for Sofan. Thank you. Thank you, Sofan. And same thing again. Start to think what he's just been saying. Think of one question. So everybody has 4 questions at the end. So we have some time for discussion. 5 seconds. Here you go. From Scotland, I would say. From Rambus, Mr. Moore. A bit of data plays a big role in everything we do when we talk about mobility, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And you're going to tell us all about it. Here you go.
Okay. I have 2 children, 2 sons, 2 boys. They are called Rory and William. Rory is the eldest. He is 6 years old, and William is the youngest. He is 4. They are both hard work, as young children are meant to be. They're great fun, though. We love them to pieces, but they are boisterous and excitable, and they're boys. I come from a family where I've got 4 siblings, and of the 5 of us, 4 are boys, so I'm kind of quite used to this. I know when they're fighting what's a good fight and is kind of playful and fun, and what's the sort of fight you need to stop because they're actually going to hurt each other. My wife has 1 sister and 1 brother, and she's not quite so au fait with what's happening. She gets really concerned that they're actually going to hurt each other quite badly. But Rory, my eldest, he has a fascination with public transport. He absolutely loves it. So we take the bus whenever we can. There's a bus stop right outside our door. And so a bus trip into Glasgow is great fun for him. So bus is good. Train is better. Train is fantastic. When we go across to Edinburgh, we always take the train, not because we're going to do anything exciting in Edinburgh, really, but because he will enjoy the train ride. Absolutely loves it. But the best one for him is the underground in the centre of Glasgow, the kind of metro system that we've got in the centre of Glasgow. It's 15 stations, it's just a circle. You either go clockwise or you go counterclockwise, but he loves it. He absolutely loves transport underneath the ground. He thinks this is fantastic. But the last time we were there with him, we had to buy him his own paper ticket. He'd got above the age where he now needs his own ticket. And so he got his paper ticket, and he insisted that I did not throw away his disposable smart card, but instead we took it home with him, and he sleeps with it underneath his pillow. Sleeps with his paper ticket because he loves it so much. He thinks it's fantastic. But only a 6-year-old truly loves ticketing. To the rest of us, it's a necessity, a requirement for proving that we've paid for travel, that we've paid to access those services. It's a barrier. It's just an essential part of our day, not a positive experience at all. It's just something we have to get through in order to access travel. Even the most convenient forms. When I use my Apple Wallet to store boarding passes, I still have the hassle of having to go through and clear them all occasionally. On Sunday there, I got rid of, I think it was about 40 boarding passes from my Apple Wallet. The future that we have to be heading towards is one without those moments of friction, where truly frictionless, ticketless travel becomes the norm, taking away those pointless barriers to entry and instead freeing up time in the passenger's day. But getting towards that frictionless, ticketless vision of the future of public transport in the smart city is not going to happen overnight. It's a process that is going to require the deployment of a number of different technologies, but more crucially, the integration of those technologies into a coherent customer offering, where the development of a smart city provides opportunity for data connections and for good infrastructure. It's up to those deploying services to make sure that we're leveraging that investment, that we're leveraging the power of those services to use them in the right way. I can see 4 major trends that will bring this vision of the future of mobility to reality. 4 technology changes in the industry that are needed to bring frictionless, ticketless vision of the future to life. The first of those is account-based ticketing. The concept here is that instead of a customer pre-purchasing a right to travel, they instead validate a credential at the start of the journey and validate the credential at the end of the journey. A ticket fare is then purchased by the system in the back office, done for you, and payment is taken from your account. Account-based ticketing relies on 2 things, therefore. It relies on a token that you can validate for travel, and it relies on a payment method from which you can collect the appropriate fare. The second technology trend is mobile, and I'll talk more about this in a little moment. The third one is use of data. At present, many of our ticketing services produce reams of data, large volumes, these great big silos of data. But in my experience, operators and local authorities are reticent to use it. They're slow to grasp the value of that data for improving customer journeys, for improving services, for marketing materials, for getting more people onto their services, grabbing people and getting them to use public transport. Finally, third-party services. We have an opportunity with the infrastructure afforded to us by smart cities to link up services in a new and better way, where customers are helped seamlessly from door to door in their travel experience. Like I said earlier, mobile is going to be a crucial part of the future of frictionless ticketing. It's rapidly become the platform of choice for deployment of smart services. And it's not difficult to see why. I always carry my mobile with me. We all do. It's in my hand more often than it's in my pocket. So it's a natural move. Over the last few years, Rambus have been deploying HCE-based mobile ticketing into the transport industry. Truly secure smart ticketing, relying on techniques proven in the payment industry to store ticketing credentials securely on a mobile device. Customers simply tap their phone to travel instead of a smart card that they would have had to tap previously. This brings customers into the 21st century, accessing tickets on their mobile, downloading tickets and traveling instantly and securely. It really reaches out into that app generation. And operators reap the benefit as well of interoperability with existing smart infrastructure. So you don't need to invest in new technology. You don't need to invest in new gates and new validation devices. You simply use what's already out there. And reducing the reliance on ticket vending machines. Instead, each customer has a ticket vending machine in their own pocket. As I finish up, I want to tell you about 2 taxi rides I've taken recently. The first one, both on the way here actually. The first one was in Glasgow, where I had about an hour in the taxi getting to the airport. And the taxi driver for the entire hour-long journey was waxing lyrical about the problems of urban mobility. He was talking to me about congestion on the motorway, how every single day, always at the same time of day, the motorway in Glasgow snarls up and you don't make progress for an hour. You just sit in a traffic jam with car after car after car after car. And a journey that normally takes me 20 minutes took me an hour. And when we arrived in Barcelona and were getting the taxi to our hotel, there was an accident in front of us on the motorway, and again, car after car after car was stuck, sitting on the motorway, doing nothing, moving nowhere. We need to be heading towards a future where there is true modal shift, moving people away from cars and onto public transport. And the way that we do that is by reducing the barriers to entry for public transport towards a ticketless and frictionless future where customers more and more choose public transport because we've reduced the barrier to entry. Thank you.
Thank you. Big hand. Frictionless, paperless, very nice. Bit of a feeling everybody gets now what smart mobility means listening to this. And now our final speaker, we saved the best for last to raise the bar a bit. She's an American, lives in Germany, so American entrepreneur spirit und Bierfeste, which is a great combination. Andrea Kolmorgen, Director of E-Mobility at Siemens. Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, you take that. So 5 years, everyone has talked about what is the future of urban mobility. We've got this 5-year benchmark. Some of us have extended it out to 15. Is that going to be a bunch of autonomous robotic taxis shuttling grandpas around the city or shuttling pizzas with nobody in the vehicle? Is it going to be Uber and Didi have taken over where public transport couldn't quite cut it? Are we going to have street lamps? These are some of the questions that we have today, and these are some of the questions we will definitely have in 5 years, and we will probably also have some of them very much in the next 15 years. And we started off the conversation earlier today about ecosystems, and I want to kind of get back to that and talk about what are some of the issues that we're trying to solve. And the mega trends are impacting our societies and especially our cities, and we're sitting here struggling to adapt to things like globalization. More and more goods, more and more nations are getting involved in exports, and we've seen a quadruple here. Again, climate change. If anyone's picked up the news and looked at all the different erratic and violent weather challenges that we're facing, we've got to solve this. And the final two that are particularly interesting to me for the work that I'm doing is 50 billion connected devices by 2020. For those of us that have phones, we're talking still on the gigabyte level. So we're talking about 44 trillion gigabytes of data being generated by these devices. How are we going to handle that in this jungle that we're creating for ourselves in this fragmented world? And urbanization, whether it's 70%, 80%, pick a target of a year, the fact of the matter is going to be that more than 2/3 of us are going to be living in cities, and half of us are already there today. And this is putting extreme constraints on the infrastructures that we have in cities, and we have to come up with a solution. But why now? And why can you not look at the news without having an article pop in front of your face about the challenges of urban mobility? And this is a particularly sensitive and proud topic that we at Siemens have, because it's something that's been at our heart since 1905. This is the one of the first electric vehicles in serial production, called the Victoria. And this vehicle was developed for luxury hotel taxi service. So already in 1905, we had an issue of inequality in transportation. So what are the big levers that we see besides equality that we're trying to solve? And Siemens, we've got a long portfolio that I won't list out for you today. But really it starts around anything that's autonomous, connected, electric, and shared. Those are the four big ones for us. We've got multiple different opportunities, but the key is that it's converging. And convergence is really what is happening in the space today. It's happening in our cities, and it's causing a tremendous need to adapt to scale and speed. And this can be seen especially in autonomous driving. And we take Waymo for a moment, and what happened in 2009. Waymo started a little experiment of driving and collecting miles on roads for autonomous vehicles. And about 6 years later, they got their first 1 million miles. The rest is history. We're talking about 50 billion connected. The data that these guys are getting from these miles, how are they going to handle it? Are we going to have an ecosystem that just allows for these autonomous driving providers? Or are we as cities going to find a way to not let this happen to us, but rather happen with us? And then you have a second topic of connected, and we talked a lot about shared earlier today. So when these three of the four, I mentioned electric, I'll get to that, but when they come together, we as Siemens, I'll raise our hand, we can give you answers to this, but we cannot do it alone. Because without this ecosystem of the providers, both public and private, working together, these are but only individual solutions. They're not sustainable. You end up with fragmentations. You end up with 80 service providers going after a small piece of the pie in the market. And you don't end up with intervention-type decisions made to benefit the end users within a city. We talked a lot about collecting data, connected assets, and being able to provide things like monitoring and predictive maintenance. That's simply just intervention, and we need to take it to the next step and start allowing cities and enabling providers to make better decisions, not just being able to understand what's happening in their cities. And then we talk about the electrification trend, another big topic that's very, very core at the heart of Siemens. But let's start with how much of the consumption in cities. 75% of the energy, 33% of that is being consumed by gas-guzzling, air-polluting, non-friendly environmental vehicles, non-environmentally friendly vehicles. And that provides a lot of headache, but it also provides a lot of opportunity. As we see this trend of electrification evolving, take a small campus example of 2,400 parking spots. If we equip 20% of the just under 500 with electric vehicle stations, we're talking about 10 megawatts going onto a grid. And raise your hand if you know of a grid that's ready to take on what's happening in China, where it's not about 500 cars, but overnight, roughly 17,000 buses went electric. No grid that I'm aware of, with one exception, is ready to handle this type of electric load. We're talking about massive sector coupling between transportation and mobility. And this isn't just about a technological solution, because it can happen once, but it has to be sustainable, it has to be future-proof. And from a Siemens perspective, we're looking at how we can help enable cities, given what's happening in autonomy, connectivity, electrification, and sharing economy, to trust more. They need to trust us as a private partner, they need to trust each other, and they need to make sure that all the solutions that they pick for their cities on a very localized level can be trusted. Which means we need to partner together more. We need to work together in very uncomfortable ways. That starts also from a Siemens perspective, we say that that starts with us. And we have to partner better internally in order to make sure that the solutions that we're delivering into the external world are also future-proof and sustainable and scalable. And we need to connect more. It's not just about data silos, it's about using them and connecting them and understanding what type of data needs to be used. We'll talk a little bit maybe about data minimalization. But we need to have a holistic approach. We need to make sure that it's scalable. We need to make sure that we develop an ecosystem that supports this. Otherwise, all we're going to deliver are individual siloed technologies to solve this. Thank you.
Thank you. Big hand. Please stay on the stage if you wish. Come on, guys. We have 15 minutes left in this session. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask, some questions for the audience. Yep. Thank you. And they will update automatically, I presume. Yeah. What I will do is I will ask one question to the panel myself. That's easy when you're a moderator. And then I want to ask you if you have any questions, because I mean, that would be a shame that we wouldn't have any time for that, basically. So please start to about how you're going to phrase your sentence. Everybody has 4 questions, as we agreed upon, didn't we? So start to queue in a moment behind the microphone over here if you wish to ask a question. So a question for all of you. I mean, this is happening right now. I mean, this is not future stuff anymore, 5 or 10 years ahead. I mean, in all the talks, we need to make decisions right now. We need to choose what we're going to do, etc. Maybe all of you, maybe you could give one example of a city where something brilliant is being done and why. We didn't prepare this question, sorry. But I mean, to make it a bit more tangible, because in an example where it actually happens, where people can go to tomorrow and see that is happening already. So we go from right to left.
So I can give you an example of a small city like Antwerp. Yeah, okay. It's in the middle of France. We engaged 3 years ago discussions with the mayor of the city and the decision makers within the city to build up together in a shared perspectives a new system of transportation, but also a new civic system with mobile application used by the citizens in order to give their needs, their opinion on the mobility and the different aspect of their daily lives. Okay?
So continuous user-centric design, get their opinion.
Exactly. And it's not a matter of transportation only, but it's a matter of organization of the city on itself, of the different districts to get together the houses with the job places, yep, and so on. And if you come on our stand, we have a very, very beautiful demonstration of a real city that it's that the project is ongoing now.
I think we all agree, and we go to the stand later on. I mentioned a few times, let's go to the stand, because you can see what actually happens.
Yeah.
I think that's a good thing. Mark, an example of stuff you've been seeing. I mean, when can I touch something? When can I see something? Experience?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I would say, I will answer your question in a moment, that every city or many cities are doing something, but I would equally challenge that very, very few, if any, cities are doing everything. So all of those technologies, all the opportunities that we've talked about. So definitely no room for complacency. I mean, if we had to pick one, why wouldn't we pick the one that we are sitting in, which is Barcelona? I mean, clearly Barcelona is a smart city. It could be smarter. We all could be smarter. But one program, an open innovation program we're working with Barcelona, including startups, is around this last mile challenge. So I would say that Barcelona is good because it's tackling that really difficult one with us.
Cool. Yep. Richard.
Okay, so I would like to start by echoing the point that was made just there, actually, that we are seeing a great fragmentation in the market, that there are systems being deployed beside each other that don't talk to each other. And you end up with silos of data and silos of functionality that don't really work for the consumer, don't deliver.
The ecosystem is a bit of an eco-mess.
Yeah, that's a good summary of that. Yeah. However, the majority of the work that we do is in the UK, where we deploy systems that conform to an interoperable ticketing specification, and so we are working hard to make sure that the solutions that we develop don't set up their own little silos, but rather work with the other players in the market in order to really foster a good ecosystem. So good examples of that are where some of the work that we're doing up in Scotland, where we've deployed the HCE ticketing solution on Scotland's national railway, ScotRail, and you can take your ScotRail app and you can load tickets on that for the Glasgow subway, as I was talking about earlier, and you can go down into the subway, use your ScotRail app, and travel on someone else's network using the ticketing solution provided by ScotRail. So just an example where operators are starting to join up services, and instead of looking at the other operators with healthy skepticism and competition, starting to work together to deliver something for the consumer.
So cool. For everybody, go before April 1st, Brexit, go to Scotland to see the ticketing system.
Come anyway.
Brilliant. I mean, obviously, Siemens has presence in every country in the world. Probably you have presence in every country, or do you miss countries?
Most.
Yeah, probably every country. There's some kind of presence. Try to select one example, I mean, the stuff you've been doing and why it's so brilliant.
Well, I think, and one of the things that you can see at our booth, no, but
what number is the booth?
Is Lisbon. So Lisbon, and I would talk more also about the region around Lisbon, also Cascais, but in particular something that they're working to build out is this ecosystem and working together. And what we're doing in Lisbon is not just introducing another e-bike sharing program, but trying to do bike sharing better, employing artificial intelligence and getting more into solving the problem of not just the constituents in Lisbon, but also understanding what are some of the problems of operators that have some of these shared vehicles, and applying and predicting and integrating stakeholders like the weather, and integrating that and predicting in order to solve the distribution challenges that impact me as an end user, but also are quite costly for operators.
So it's using existing assets and infrastructures and connect them actually in that perspective, and not doing everything new. Yeah, okay. It's actually a Dutch philosopher stated a few months ago, basically, I like the sentence, said, new is not better, better is better. And we don't need to only think new, we need to improve stuff there as well. I think that's, as you said. Questions from the audience? And everybody has 4 questions, so I'm going to ask a few people what your question is, basically. There you go. Yeah, there's a mic over there. Could you, yeah, sorry, yeah, thank you. Thanks.
My name's Mark from Singapore. It's a short question. Blockchain. I haven't heard it mentioned, although I came in just halfway through the starting session.
The first session in Barcelona where blockchain wasn't mentioned, ladies and gentlemen.
Isn't that interesting? So I mean, busting through the noise. We know there's a lot happening with freight. We know there's some very large companies moving their logistics platforms to freight. But I'm more interested, and that will certainly benefit cities, I'm more interested in the potential for mass transit. And I'm sure some of you will have a perspective on that.
Who wants to? One person gets the opportunity.
I talk about blockchain, but I'm not going to talk about blockchain for mass transit. I'll talk about blockchain from a charging perspective. Because blockchain is, I'm not a blockchain expert, but what we look at, there's a eco-mess, as you called it, in some of this mobility development. And what we don't need to do is add things unnecessarily. So where blockchain adds value, and what we're looking at it is for authentication and identity management around charging, and starting to build up a transaction-based blockchain network for e-mobility charging, and doing this in Berlin. So it's an option. There's the jury's out, or I think you have polarizing opinions on that. But blockchain for the sake of blockchain, we're trying to be very cautious on where we deploy blockchain for that.
Yeah, cool.
I would kind of echo those points. I think we need to be careful not to get too starry-eyed about, we hear the buzzword of blockchain and everyone thinks, wow, that must be better, that must somehow be more exciting. We must somehow fit that into what we're already doing. But blockchain only adds value where it adds value. And if there's not a problem to be solved that blockchain solves, then there's no point in adding it to an existing system and an existing ecosystem and infrastructure. So I think we should be careful at chasing after a buzzword, chasing after a technology, which doesn't actually solve a problem that we have.
Cool. Okay. Question from Lewis from the audience to Mark. Mark, you mentioned that try to make it apolitical in your presentation. What are corporates doing, like Ferrovial, doing to push that new governance, new regulations then? I mean, how does that work?
Well, I think this is an aspiration. If I turn it around, if we know that it could be mobility, it could be housing, it could be energy, it could be anything. But if it becomes political, then we know it has very short cycles, and it struggles, it becomes divisive, and so on. I think the benefit is to look from the citizen point of view. And then, sure, individual citizens have political opinions, but generally they talk in terms of outcomes. And actually, politicians and leaders and policymakers also talk in terms of outcomes. I want a cleaner city, a better city. I want my journey time to be more reliable. I mean, all these are outcomes. So we're trying to encourage that kind of conversation. I think a longer-term dialogue, a longer-term vision and a roadmap necessarily takes you away from politics. We all get very tempted by it, but if we could possibly move away from that, think about outcomes. We're doing lots of work on procurement to try and enable that as well, but those are only some things we're doing. There's probably some equally good things that you guys are doing as well.
Okay, cool, thanks. Anonymous asks a question. That's always exciting, isn't it? Andrea, how is Siemens planning to achieve partnerships with cities? I mean, what's your approach in that?
It's
in 2 minutes.
Yeah. Oh, that's long. So, co-creation, I think, is one of the big elements of that. So co-location and co-creation. We have a unique experience based on the fact that we're not structured the way that this world is evolving. So we bring that and also sit down across the table, and we don't try and tell cities what they need, but we try and put ourselves open up ourselves as well, and really tackle specific problems. I know that sounds abstract. Yep. But if we do it the other way, where we sit in our labs for 3 years and we engineer out the best solution, and then we bring it and we say, hey, look, here's what you want and here's what you need, then it's probably 99.9% guaranteed that that's not what that city needs. So really making sure that and then investing in that city, co-locating. We've got a team that sits here, that sits in Lisbon and is working on this this e-bike solution and the artificial intelligence. So also changing the way that we're doing business in order to approach it.
Okay, cool. I think this is a big question, how to organize partnerships between public and private, etc. That also means, Anonymous again asked another question, but I alter it a bit to all of you as a last question. Was asked, I mean, when you start to use data to be more efficient, maybe some, well, companies lose clients because you're more efficient and, well, so there will also be losers in this game, probably, basically. I mean, and there's so are companies willing to, well, maybe get less users or less revenue, and is this a problem, yes or no? Some will win and some will lose. That's basically the question.
We don't.
We're all winners.
Yeah, we don't lose.
No.
Yeah.
No, but maybe
yes, you're absolutely
car
right.
manufacturers or
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So the strategy is to, as Andrea said, is to share opinion. We cannot actually a company as ours. We are an integrator of solutions. We are not a solution provider, and as you can find technical solutions for different vertical problems. The mean is to build solutions that will answer the needs of people, of citizens. And with my experience, I didn't find two different cities with with the same solution. Donc, the need is different, and we should. It's our strategy. We should build with the solution providers as well as the decision makers. Yeah,
cool.
For us.
Mark.
So look, as a service provider, we don't make our own technology. So accordingly, we're able to be agnostic and choose the right technology or the right solution for the right scenario. But sure, I mean, there are winners and losers in these things, but it's a big old world out there. And I think what we have to do, just building on the point there, is listening and understanding what the city needs. And delivering the right solution for them.
Also means maybe inventing new companies with new incentives and new business models.
Sure, yeah.
Cool.
Be agile. Always.
Yeah, and be agile, yeah.
I was probably the only person who's not going to say that I'm not a technology supplier. we are technology suppliers, and I think you know, it's undeniable that there are going to be losers. If you see modal shift from one set of technologies across to the other, that there are going to be winners and losers in that race, and you know, as well as thinking when we're coming to deploying new systems and new services, as well as thinking what the technology is involved, and thinking about what the political landscape is that we're deploying into, I think it's undeniable that you've got to think as well what the commercial imperative is.
Yep.
From an operator's point of view, they're in this to make money, and they have to be able to do so, and that's going to involve giving money to suppliers, receiving money from passengers, and so we've got to be thinking what the commercial imperative is for people to deploy and to do what they're going to do.
Okay, cool, thanks. Blinking red numbers over there, so last answer.
There's going to be winners and losers, of course, and we have to. Yeah, I think the only way through that from a Siemens perspective is to partner, because 20% of zero is still zero.
Yeah, nice, well done. Yeah. So thanks. So on stage we only have winners, ladies and gentlemen. Please give them a big hand. Thank you. You will be wrapping up there for the session. Yes,
you can leave if you want. You can stay if you feel comfortable. Now, I think I could give you an example of what a loser will be. It's if I give you the example of a bus carrying one passenger at midnight in some suburbs of London. Obviously, this kind of bus service will vanish and disappear because on-demand service will be much more efficient. And with AVs, or applied to vans, minivans, obviously those lines will have to be stopped. There will be, of course, cannibalization. I'm sure that public transit would lose some clients if the shared vehicles are more. So there will be some change. And when I was leading the UITP, I was keep telling to the CEO of the large PT organization, hey, if you carry on running your trains and your metros, and not looking around, you're going to lose because the market is changing. So maybe you could also become, instead of being only a transportation company, you could be a mobility company and try to integrate all the new mobility that you have around. And when I was the CEO of this Brussels system, I organized in such already in the year 2000 that the smart card would be for transport, public transport, but also for car sharing and for bike sharing. So it was already in 2002, so it's already existing for a while. That was not the purpose of my last word. I'm keeping you 1 minute or two to wrap up what happened and to try to keep, the message at the leave behind that you will bring home when making a summary of what we heard this morning. And I've tried to be not detailed on facts, but I think the first question that we need to raise is not about mobility. Is first, what kind of city do we want? Because mobility is only an ingredient of a nice city and smart city. But the first question is, how do we describe the kind of city we want? And we should be agreeing on this. And obviously, if I take the example of Beijing or New Delhi, or the example of Copenhagen, you would see immediately that there is a huge room for discussion, for political discussion, for citizen contribution. Once we know, when I was joining public transport in the year 2000, mobility was not at all an issue. It only started in 2002, 2005. We were transporting people and city was still okay. Then congestion charge in London, early 2000, that's the beginning of the problem. And so now, obviously, it's a hot issue, and I like whoever said at some point in time that mobility is a good bet, because it seems indeed to everybody now is busy with mobility, which is a risk also, because sometimes politicians would get involved, and although I have great respect for them, they may want to have solutions which are not really sustainable. We want modal shift. I think you explain it again. We want less car, although we should not be against the car. It's a great invention, and it's useful. If you're a doctor and you don't have a very good public transport system, how do you go from houses to houses if you don't have a car? Maybe we can improve the car, maybe you could use it properly, but it will still be needed for a certain critical issue, like bringing goods, food to a city. How do you do? Of course, you don't need 20 tons trucks. You may have smaller van, but at least you will need cars. So I just want to be clear, it's not a fight against but we want just to balance it a bit more, like a city like Copenhagen, where you have 25% bikers, 25% pedestrian, 25% PT, and 25% car. And that looks like it's a pleasant city to live in, however difficult the weather is there. So it seems like there were some questions that we might have to keep in mind. There is the governance issue. I think it's very important. We want it to be for everybody. At least that's what I understood. And to do so, we need to involve the citizens and the politicians so that it's a co-creation, like our colleague from Siemens was coming. It's the only way we can do it together. I know it gets the whole process slower because it takes a bit of time. But as she rightly said, coming up and giving a technology never works. It has to be adapted to the local needs, to the local circumstance, the environment. So, but being clear who leads the show, it seems to me that we need to be clear, like you said very well, clear on the role of the public part. And the role of the market, which is the one which generally creates innovation. So this difficult balance between the two is a hard job, and that's why politicians have been elected. It's to try to find the right balance. The second thing is the user. I think it's very important that we put the user in the middle of the picture, because technology is fine, but if it doesn't satisfy the demand of the people, what the hell? So the user and making his life easy. When I was in public transport, that was my mantra for 12 years. I was saying, make the life of your client easy. Buying a ticket. I remember my own experience in Milano on a Sunday. Try to take the tramway. No way to find a ticket. Everything is closed. You don't really, and you cannot enter the tramway. So obviously those days are gone. But today, to make the life for knowing where to go, where to stop, what is my itinerary, how do I get a correspondence, how do I pay, to have all this on this platform, that is the future MAAS, which obviously already exists. And then a second word, which is partnering. I think that we should keep in mind, that there is no one-size-fits-all, there is no one guy having... And of course, the struggle for power is so big that you might think that Google may want to run the show. We should resist to this. Google has not been elected. They're a very smart company. I have nothing against them, and they can provide us with great invention, but they should be at the service of a collective process, which is built collectively under the guidance of our politician. And I like to finish this by quoting what our German colleague said, which was UITP vision when I was heading it, was we want clean, connected, shared, and autonomous type of mobility. And those words are enough. I'm just convinced that it will take more time than what we think, like the autonomous. Do you know that, for instance, there has been simulation that if you have autonomous car, 100%, it works fine. You increase the capacity of the system. But in the meantime, when you have 20% of AVs and, say, the standard car, you reduce the capacity of the system. So this is, so that I like also what you said, is that you need a roadmap, and a roadmap which is realistic, where all the stakeholders are getting involved, and that will be the future of mobility and of our livable city. Thank you very much for your attention.